Hey guys, and welcome back to the Game of Thrones Foreshadowing series, and let's pick up right where we left off in Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 9, Fire and Blood. Hey guys, it's Chris, and welcome back to SmokeScreen, and right before we jump into the Foreshadowing series, let me remind you really quickly, if you're into audiobooks or books in general, you can go to audibletrial.com/smokescreen and receive a free 30-day trial and a free audiobook as well. These are really good for A Song of Ice and Fire rereads, or the first read for that matter. You can listen to it anywhere, anytime, and not to mention all the audiobooks of A Song of Ice and Fire are narrated by the late great Roy DeTroyce, who did play the Pyromancer in Game of Thrones. So anyway guys, if you're interested in giving Audible a try, again head over to audibletrial.com/smokescreen and get your free 30-day trial with a free audiobook of your choice. So anyway, let's jump right back in where we left off. And in our first scene here, we see Robb being proclaimed King in the North.
There sits the only king I mean to bend my knee to. The King in the North!
Am I your brother, now and always?
Now and always.
My sword is yours, in victory and defeat, from this day until my last day.
The King in the North!
So we have Big John Umber, the one who actually proclaimed Robb King in the North, and then of course all the other Northern Lords joined in, but it's really interesting that the guy that seemed to oppose Robb so much ended up being the one that respected him the most, enough to acknowledge him as King in the North, and then later on, unfortunately, we would see this.
I might have done the same to my father if he hadn't have done me the favor of dying on his own.
Your father honored tradition.
Knelt for Robb Stark, called him King of the North. Was Robb Stark right to trust your father? Fuck kneeling and fuck oaths.
So apparently Big John Umber died off screen by natural causes, but unfortunately his son Small John Umber had to damn pledge his fealty to Ramsay fucking Bolton. And of course during this same scene, while all the lords are pledging their fealty and bending the knee to Robb, we hear Theon say this.
My sword is yours, in victory and defeat, from this day until my last day.
So Theon gives his detailed pledge to Robb. Unfortunately, later on, we would see this.
I've taken your castle.
Theon?
It's Prince Theon now.
You went with Robb.
And he sent me back to Pike. I'm a Greyjoy. I can't fight for Robb and my father both.
So Theon had pledged himself to Robb, and this goes into Theon's storyline as well about his identity crisis similar to Arya's. Was he a Stark? Was he a Greyjoy? So he actually betrayed Robb and took Winterfell, and of course that's when Bran also decided to leave Winterfell himself to go find the Three-Eyed Raven. And in our next scene we see Jaime Lannister being held captive, and Catelyn gives him a visit.
What gods are those? The trees your husband prayed to? Where were the trees when his head was getting chopped off? If your gods are real, and if they're just, why is the world so full of injustice?
So they have obviously now heard about Ned's death, and of course Jaime references their old tree gods, and where were the northern tree gods while Ned Stark was getting his head removed, but of course that ties into this.
You're the Three-Eyed Raven.
I've been many things. Now, I am what you see. I've been watching you. All of you. All of your lives. With 1,000 eyes and one.
So you could really pick any scene here as far as this payoff goes, but the point being here is that her own son is in the process of becoming one of these tree gods. And of course, if you watch my channel, you know I believe there are no gods in this story, although we'll never get a definitive answer. But I do believe people like Bloodraven and Bran, Catelyn's own son, pertaining to this particular scene, are actually the old gods themselves. Also, during this conversation with Catelyn, we hear Jaime say this.
That is what you want the world to believe, isn't it? That you don't fear death?
But I don't, my lady. The dark is coming for all of us. Why cry about it?
So Jaime tells Catelyn the dark is coming for us all, while run from it, but later on in season 7, Jaime actually gets proof of this when we see this. So Jaime essentially told us back in Season 1, Episode 10, what was going to happen in Season 7 when the wall came tumbling down. And of course, during the same conversation, we see Catelyn and Jaime have this exchange.
My son, Bran. How did he come to fall from that tower?
I pushed him out the window.
Why?
I hoped the fall would kill him.
Why?
So this kind of goes back to my previous point here. Jaime and Catelyn are talking about the old gods here in combination with Bran as far as why Jaime pushed Bran out the window in the first place. He did actually admit it to Catelyn right there on the spot. He was trying to kill him, but notice he didn't say why. But the point being here, they're talking about Bran and the old gods, etc. And of course later on, we would see this.
I didn't want anyone to die for me.
He died so you could find what you have lost.
Going to help me walk again?
You'll never walk again. But you will fly.
So Bran, the very person they're talking about, Catelyn's son, actually ends up becoming an old god himself. And of course, during this conversation, Jaime did not tell Catelyn the reason why he pushed Bran out the window, but we see why when it immediately switches over to this.
What does it say? What's our next move?
Stop talking. Get back into bed.
So this, of course, shows us the reason he didn't want anybody to know that he actually loves Cersei. And I think this does show that Jaime actually loves Cersei to his fullest, but Cersei didn't quite reciprocate those feelings. She really only loves Jaime when it's convenient for her. And then we switch over to the Lannister camp after Robb has captured Jaime and won a few victories. Even though Ned Stark has now died, we see this.
They have my son.
The Stark boy appears to be less green than we'd hoped.
We should march on them at once.
First, we must return to Casterly Rock to raise
They
more.
have my son!
Get out, all of you.
So Tywin is pissed off here because they have his son, Jaime Lannister, and of course that makes Tyrion as usual feel a little bit slighted because he doesn't feel like Tywin loves him as his son, but of course we do see this.
I always thought you were a stunted fool. Perhaps I was wrong.
Half wrong?
You will go to King's Landing.
And do what?
Rule. You will serve as Hand of the King in my stead.
Why not my uncle? Why not anyone? Why me?
You're my son.
So Tywin does actually show a bit of respect to Tyrion here as far as you are my son, you would go be Hand of the King in my stead, and that's a lot of responsibility, so I'm sure this makes Tyrion feel a little bit better or feel a little bit respected at least, but of course Tywin also says this.
You will not take that whore to court. Do you understand?
So of course this gives us a little more insight into the relationship between Tywin and his sons, Jaime and Tyrion, and of course this brings Shae into the mix as well when Tywin tells Tyrion you cannot bring that whore to court, and of course later on we find out the truth when we see this.
And I would let myself be consumed by maggots before mocking the family name and making you heir to Casterly Rock.
Why?
You who killed your mother to come into the world. You are an ill-made, spiteful little creature, full of envy, lust, and low cunning. Men's laws give you the right to bear my name and display my colors, since I cannot prove that you are not mine.
So in this particular scene, we see Tywin kind of acknowledging Tyrion as his son, and then of course in the payoff scene, we see him saying, I cannot prove you're not mine, showing his true colors, and of course later on, that sets up this.
You're no son of mine. I am your son. I have always been your son.
And also something very, very cool, which I hope relates to the endgame here as far as one of my theories. During this conversation with Tywin and Tyrion, we hear Tywin say this.
Sir Gregor will head out with 500 riders and set the Riverland on fire from God's Eye to the Red Fork. The rest of us will regroup at Harrenhal.
So we heard the word God's Eye in this story for the first time, and of course if you watch this channel, you know I think that relates to the Endgame, and if you're seeing these for the first time or the channel for the first time, I'll put a link in the description below to a series we did on how I think this thing's going to end, and I believe the God's Eye is involved with that as far as the Owl of Faces. So anyway, I thought that was pretty damn cool to actually hear it mentioned in the show. And not just mentioned, but the way it was mentioned, because he does say, set fire from the God's Eye to the Red Fork. And of course, we know now the Night King is riding a damn dragon. And in our next scene, we head over to Essos, where we see Dany and the remainder of her Khalasar.
They say the child was...
monstrous. Twisted. I pulled him up myself. He was scaled like a lizard. Blind, with leather wings like the wings of a bat.
So we hear Mirri Maz Duur tell Dany that basically Rhaego, her unborn child who died during birth, actually kind of looked like a dragon. Of course, she says the wings of a bat. We all kind of know what that means when she says wings of a bat and scales. So it shows that Dany had essentially a dragon baby. And of course, we keep getting this whole thing, death pays for life. And of course, that in combination with other things during this episode leads up to the very end of this episode when we see this.
Blood of my blood.
So Dany was starting to realize this throughout this episode, and we had 3 dragons for 3 lives. We had Drogo, we had Rhaego, and we had, of course, Mirri Maz Duur herself. 3 deaths paid for 3 lives, and of course, out of the flames came Viserion, Drogon, and of course, Rhaegal. And during this same sequence as well, we do see Jorah continue to counsel Dany on what to do next, and we hear Jorah say this.
A Khal who cannot ride is no Khal. The Dothraki follow only the strong. I'm sorry, my princess.
So I think there are many other scenes that will lead up to this payoff scene as well in upcoming episodes, and of course we'll get to those. But essentially Jorah is telling Dany here that they only respect strength, and of course later on in season 6, we do see this.
Ieri você aqui. Ieri vadrivoi.
Alright guys, so that'll do it for this episode. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as usual, thank you for all the support, especially to you guys on Patreon. And a huge shout out to my executive Patreon SmokeScreen producers, Griffin, Volguy10, Lala Gig, Kissa Powell, Marc Joseph, aka The Snow in Winterfell, Marylin, Bentley, JoAnna, Anonymous, Doc Holiday, Goska, HoonJive, Nicki Snow, Horton, Erin Habig, Dean Bwell, John Carey, Anastasia, Jason Landers, Rhiaanon, DTizSmith, MJW, Carole Brown, and D Brown. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the support, and to everybody on Patreon, especially during the off season, and especially with YouTube demonetizing every damn video for at least the first couple of days. Also, be sure to subscribe to get everything, and be sure to click that notification bell so you're notified when I drop a new video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
With no one there to hear. Yes, now the rains we pour is whole, and now the soul to hear.